Assalamualaikum. We are from Group 6. In this video, we will be introducing the ideology of relativism, a very important idea in philosophy, culture, and even science. At its core, relativism is the belief that truth, morality, and knowledge are not absolute or fixed. Instead, they are shaped by the perspective, culture, history, or even language of each person or society. This means that one group of people considers true or right might be seen very differently by another group. Relativism challenges the idea that there is only one objective, truth, or one correct set of moral values that apply to everyone, everywhere, at all times. The idea of relativism can actually be traced back to ancient Greece. One of the earliest philosophers to suggest this was Protagoras, who famously said, "Man is the measure of all things." This statement means that what is true or meaningful depends on each individual's perception. Today, relativism continues to shape major discussions in philosophy, ethics, science, and global relations. In this presentation, we will look into this ideology more deeper.
The ideology of relativism, roughly put, is the view that truth and falsity, right and wrong, standard of reasoning, and procedures of justification are products of different conventions and framework of assessment, and that their authority is confined to the context given rise to them. Relativism is sometimes identified, which is usually by its critic, as the thesis that points of view are equally valid. In ethics, this amounts to saying that all moralities are equally good. In epistemology, it implies that all beliefs or belief systems are equally true. Critics of relativism typically dismiss such views, such as incoherencies that imply the validity even of the view that relativism is false. They also charge that such views are pernicious since they undermine the enterprise of trying to improve our ways of thinking. So in easy word, relativism is the idea of what is true, right or wrong can depend on the person, culture, or situation. There is no absolute truth that applies to everyone, everywhere, all the time. The founder of relativism philosophy had existed way back in 490 until 420 BC, much before the term relativism even existed. Date back to the very beginnings of Western philosophy. Protagoras of Abdera is often considered the first overt champion of relativism. Based on his famous ideas, man is the measure of all things, of the things which are, that they are, and of the things which are not, that they are not. Protagoras lived during a time when Greek democracy, philosophy, and public debate were thriving, especially in Athens. People were questioning old traditions and thinking more about individual opinions, so relativism naturally fit into that culture. Firstly, there was a shift away from mythological explanations of the world towards more rational and human-centered thinking. Secondly, the rise of democratic practices in Athens means that persuasive argument rather than divine authority became the main way to resolve conflicts and make decisions. However, not all philosophers accepted relativism. Plato, for example, strongly criticized Protagoras, believing the truth must exist independently of human opinion. Despite criticism, relativism continued to influence later periods, especially during the Renaissance and in modern philosophy, where thinkers like Nietzsche revisited the idea and truth could be subjective. In truth, relativism existed during turbulent periods, especially during the Renaissance and in modern philosophy, where thinkers like Nietzsche revisited the idea that truth could be subjective. In short, relativism emerged during a transformative period in Greek history, deeply tied to the growth of individual reasoning and democratic life.
First, it's important to understand that relativism is not the same as individualistic subjectivism, where anything goes intellectually. The truth is decided by individual whims or even a simple majority vote. But relativism doesn't settle intellectual questions by popularity or personal impulse. Instead, relativism challenges the idea that there is one single correct way to interpret reality, to live ethically, or to define concepts like beauty and justice. They argue that these ideas can be understood differently depending on the cultural or individual perspective, and that's not the same as saying anything goes. Relativism also depends heavily on perception. Reality and meaning aren't always fixed, objective facts floating out there independently. Instead, they are often constructed by individuals or groups shaped by language, culture, and experience. However, relativism carries a built-in tension. If anything is relative, then even the claim everything is relative could be questioned. In this sense, relativism can be seen to be both true and false at the same time. One cannot consistently defend relativism without, in a way, also undermining it. Finally, the principle of belief in relativism is that what is true or right for one person or culture might not be true for another. This doesn't mean that there are no truth, it simply means that truth can vary across different contexts. In short, relativism asks us to reconsider the certainty of our truth and encourage openness to the diversity of human experience, while still recognizing the complexity with paradox within its own framework.
The next point is impact of the ideology. The first impact is loss of religious belief, where relativism makes people view religious as just a personal belief, not an absolute truth. Faith becomes weaker because religion is no longer seen as the one and only path to salvation. It leads to skepticism about religion. People think religion is just a personal version of the truth, not the real truth anymore. The second one is confusion in moral values. Moral principles become personal opinions, where people decide for themselves what is right or wrong based on personal feelings, situation, or popular trends, without referring to universal standards like religious teachings. Next is weakening of religious texts and authority. Relativism pushes people to see religious scriptures as dynamic and open to any interpretation, not fixed. People start choosing only parts of the religion they like and reject the rest, creating personalized religions that suit their desires. The next one is spread of pluralism. It promotes the idea that all religions are equally true and makes people believe it's wrong to say only my religion is the true one, weakening of exclusiveness of religious faith. This also creates confusion, making it harder for young Muslims to hold onto their faith proudly in multicultural societies. The next impact is breakdown of universal values. It promotes the idea that no universal moral standards exist, and it leads to acceptance of practices that were once seen as immoral, just because they are culturally accepted. And action like racism, exploitation, and injustice become normal within certain cultures because there is no agreement on universal morality. The last one is rise of individualism and subjectivism. People put their feelings and experiences as the measure of truth. Religious obligations and social duties are neglected in favor of personal happiness and freedom. Everyone creates their own meaning of life, religion, morality, and etc.
First, one of the strengths of relativism is that it promotes tolerance and understanding among different peoples and cultures. By we acknowledge diverse worldviews, relativism encourages respectful coexistence. Where Allah says in the Quran, Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 13, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and made you people and tribes that you may know one another. This verse shows that Allah divided human communities into nations and tried for that was a natural way of creating cooperation and affection-enhancing social experience. Furthermore, Islam recognizes that customs and traditions may differ across societies, as long as they don't contradict with the Sharia Allah has made. As Rasulullah taught, what is considered good by a Muslim is good in the sight of Allah, and what is considered evil by a Muslim is evil in the sight of Allah. Another positive aspect of relativism is acknowledgement of human diversity in thought and practice is to recognize diversity as a sign of Allah's will. Next, the primary shortcoming is that relativism denies the existence of absolute truth. If all truths are equally valid, then truth itself becomes subjective and fluid. In contrast, Islam teaches that truth is objective and stems solely from divine revelation. Allah declares in the Quran in Surah Al-Isra verse 81 and say, "Truth has come and falsehood has perished. Indeed, falsehood is natural and bound to perish." Furthermore, relativism leads to moral confusion and instability. If morality is entirely subjective, actions such as oppression, injustice, or corruption could theoretically be justified under cultural norms. Islam categorically opposes this moral ambiguity. Justice must always be upheld, even against oneself or close relatives, as in Surah An-Nisa verse 135 state, "O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses to Allah, even if it be against yourself or parents and relatives." Lastly, relativism also opens the door to following personal desires over divine guidance. In Islamic teaching, following desires without reference to religion is seen as a major source of misguidance. Allah warns in Surah Al-Qasas, "But if they do not respond to you, they know that they only follow their desires, and who is more astray than one who follows his desire without guidance from Allah."
In conclusion, relativism is a powerful reminder that human experience, belief, and values are incredibly diverse. It teaches us that truth is not always a single, universal concept. What is considered right or true often depends heavily on cultural background, historical moment, and personal perspective. Throughout history, relativism has influenced a wide range of areas, from moral philosophy to cultural studies and even to scientific theory. It has encouraged us to become more open-minded, helping us understand and respect practices and ideas that are different from our own. However, relativism also brings important challenges. If we accept that all viewpoints are equally valid, how do we respond to practice that harm others or violate human rights? Therefore, understanding relativism requires balance. We need to recognize the diversity of human experience without falling into the trap of thinking that anything is acceptable simply because it exists somewhere. On top of that, relativism invites us to approach the world with empathy, humility, and a willingness to reflect critically on our own beliefs. By doing so, we can create a more thoughtful and respectful global society. I think that's all from us. Thank you.
Relativism has been around for as long as humans have been human, but has gained a much greater relevance since the advent of postmodern philosophy. Relativism is exactly what it sounds like. Truth is relative to the individual. If there is absolute truth, according to the relativist, we cannot know it. Therefore, anyone's truth claim is valid. Relativists will not make any absolute truth claims, except perhaps that all truth is relative, ironically, and will generally not disparage others' truth claims as being false. Relativism is common among lay people, and you can often hear it identified by phrases such as, "You have your truth and I have mine." Relativism is different than skepticism in that relativism gives equal validity to all truth claims, whereas skepticism, speaking very generally, equally invalidates all truth claims. or at very least, they're skeptical of all truth claims.
Hey guys, did you know that in India, a child marriage is actually more normal, but in other part of the world, it is considered taboo or even like a crime? What do you guys think?
Isn't it considered relativism? Basically, relativism is the idea that considered right or wrong based on the culture and society. So not everyone follow the standard at the society and culture.
Oh, I also read some article about the child marriage in India and Africa. That it's normal for kids there to marry at the age of 16 and 17, I guess, and for them it's normal in their community.
But if you look at countries like US or Europe, people would totally frown upon it. They see it as child marriage and or even consider it as illegal.
Exactly. So some things that is normal and respected in one part of the world can be seen as completely wrong in another.
Oh, so that is what relativism tries to tell us, that there is no universal truth for everyone. So it really depends on where we live and what our society believes.
If we only look things from our own perspectives, it's so easy for us to judge them without understanding.
At the same time, there are bigger issues like human rights. Some people argue that even if it's cultural, marrying too young is still harmful because the person might not be mature enough to decide.
True, that's where it gets complicated. Should we respect every culture practice just because it's tradition? Or should there be a line somewhere?
I guess relativism reminds us to be open-minded first. Try to understand why something exists before immediately labeling it as a right or wrong.
But guys, we also need to think critically. In the case of child marriage, a lot of studies shows that young girls who marry young often face issues like dropping out of school, health risks during pregnancy, and mental health struggles.
Exactly, especially when they come from poor backgrounds, sometimes early marriage is seen as a way to escape poverty. But at the same time, they sacrifice their education and future opportunities.
Some countries have already changed their law to minimum age that 18 years old for girls and 21 years old for boys for better protect their children from being forced into marriage too early.
Malaysia also had discussion about this. There were calls to tighten the rules on underage marriage, especially after some high-profile cases that were appeared in the news.
Yeah, so it's like we respect cultural practices, but we also have to look at the impact on individuals. Not everything traditional is automatically good.
So in the end, relativism teaches us that the world is full of different ways of living. We can't just expect everyone to follow the same set of rules.
Exactly, and if we want to live peacefully in a diverse world, we have to respect those differences, even if we don't always agree.
So the case of young marriage is clearly showing that something acceptable in one culture might not be completely unacceptable in another.
Yeah, it really makes you rethink what you assume is normal or correct, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, we should still protect vulnerable groups, especially children, from practices that could harm them in the long run.
So guys, I think it's interesting to hear about each other's opinion on this topic. So I think maybe we can meet again next time to discuss more.
Yeah, sure.
It's